Hi everyone, welcome to the Autosports Betting Pod Ashes podcasts, and I'm Steve Wiss. I'm joined by Kevin Harper, and we're going to be previewing the series outright along with the first Test match. And throughout the whole series, we're going to be having a preview for each respective Test match as they come along. So I welcome Kev on board. How are you doing?
Pretty good, Steve. Actually, yeah. Obviously, I'm looking forward to this series. Should be a cracking series. It is the big series in cricket, isn't it? Particularly Test cricket, and the start of quite a winter of cricket.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like an Ashes series, especially down under, is there really? And I mean, for those who don't know, well, actually, anyone listening to this surely is going to have a grasp of the Ashes, you think. So I'm not going to bore you into the obvious details. But England against Australia, 5 Test matches. Whoever wins the series wins the Ashes. If it ends a drawn series, England will retain the Ashes. So we're 5 Test matches starting at the Gabba, 23rd to 27th of November. Second test is from Adelaide. That's a day-night test match to 2nd to the 6th of December. Then we go to Western Australia to Perth, 14th to the 18th of December. Boxing Day test match comes from the MCG, 26th to 30th. And the 5th test match comes from Sydney, 4th to the 8th of January. So, yes, well, we're going to start off with England. And, I mean, when the Ashes squad was announced, or even in the week before it was announced, this is when Ben Stokes was in the squad. It was talked about largely as being one of the worst ever England Ashes squads to travel down under, Kev. I mean, what's your personal opinion of that?
Well, I think that's obviously a little bit extreme, isn't it? I mean, that's the world we live in. It's either boom or bust, isn't it? Listen, I don't think it's great. I don't think it's the greatest squad that will ever tour Australia. Who knows? There may not be a worse one that tours in the future. But the one thing that it does have is it has 2 world-class batsmen, truly world-class batsmen, 2 truly world-class bowlers, and 4 or 5 players that, if they go well, can certainly have an impact on the series. Is it the side that Andrew Strauss took out there 8 years ago? No, it's probably not. But I don't think it's too much different, to be fair.
In terms of world Test cricket right now, where are England at, would you say, in terms of, I mean, in comparison to the other top teams?
Well, I think India are head and shoulders the best side in the world right now. South Africa not far behind. But if you're using South Africa as a decent sort of benchmark, you've only got to think back to the summer. And England gave them a mighty good series. In fact, they beat them, didn't they? So, I don't think England are too far behind at all. Yes, they're heavily reliant on 4, maybe 5 individual players to step up and be counted. But what happens if one of the 6 unheralded players has a series of their life? All of a sudden, Australia have got some problems.
Yeah, well, the England lineup, well, likely lineup, you've got Alistair Cook and Mark Stoneman opening the batting, James Vince at number 3, Joe Root at 4, David Malan at 5. No Ben Stokes, so Johnny Bairstow is going to have to move up to number 6 and Moeen Ali up to number 7.
Yeah, they'll bat the other way around.
So they're going to bat the other way around?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Chris Woakes, Stuart Broad, Jake Ball, Jimmy Anderson, other bowling options, Mason Crane, Craig Overton, Tom Curran, reserve batsman Gary Ballance, reserve keeper Ben Foakes. Is Ben Stokes going to make an appearance at any stage of the series? Probably not, but I mean, you never know, do you? So, I mean, you talked about the 2 world-class players. Let's start there with the bat. That is Alistair Cook and Joe Root. I mean, it's a fairly obvious statement, but if England are going to do anything in this series, both of them are going to have to perform relatively well, aren't they?
Yeah, but that's not something that's, a risk or anything like that, or unlikely to happen. These 2 are world-class batsmen because they deliver, series in, series out. Alistair Cook, we all know what Alistair Cook is. He's, what's the word? Dour, I guess. He's got 2 shots, cut shot, flick off his pads, but he scores an awful lot of runs with them. And he's experienced in Australian conditions, isn't he? He racked up best part of 800 runs there 8 years ago. And obviously, we can allow him a poor series sort of 4 years ago. Nobody really had a great series. So That's understandable, and maybe as captain that kind of weighed him down a little bit. But he had a decent enough summer, didn't he? Without being fantastic. But I certainly think that the captaincy off his shoulders is very much a good thing. I think we'll see the batsman that we saw sort of 8 years ago, and if we do see that, then Australia have got problems.
Are you worried about his sort of lack of form coming into the series? He had a poor series against the West Indies, didn't he? Apart from scoring 243, which is kind of a ridiculous thing to say. But after that, he struggled, didn't he, big time? And he's not scored many runs in the warm-up games. But that isn't really a big concern, is it, with someone as experienced as him?
No, not really. The day I take any notice of warm-up matches will be the day I give up gambling. Professional sportsmen, and I said it an awful lot on the darts podcast that we did last week, professional sportsmen find it mighty hard to perform when the intensity is not there. And that's warm-up. Warm-up cricket is just to acclimatise to the conditions. And, if you score some runs, happy days. But, Cookie's been out there long enough in a number of series to know how the wickets play. He's faced all the bowlers before. He'll face them all again. I have no problems on that ground. Is he going to score 50 in every innings? No, he's not. But he'll score enough over the course of the innings for England to be more than competitive.
Joe Root, with the captaincy, do you think it's a good or a bad thing for him? Is he going to be? I mean, he's going to be under a lot of pressure, whatever, in this series. But he's delivered under a lot of pressure before, so you'd expect it to continue.
Yeah, I don't have no problems with Joe Root as a captain in terms of the way the side plays under him, in terms of the way he leads the side in the field, in terms of the mannerisms that he shows. I think they're all good. I think he's selfish, which is a bad thing. He should be batting at number 3 in this side, not at number 4. But he'll score runs at number 4, so that's fine. I actually think he's got the right temperament to succeed. And actually, obviously, having Andrew Strauss out there, the last England captain to captain England to a series win down under, that will really help Joe Root. But he's got that kind of personality, hasn't he? That he can brush things off quite easily, and but at the same time he's feisty as well, as Dave Warner can testify. So I have no problems with Joe Root. I think he'll have a really, really good series. Obviously, he's captaining on these grounds for the first time. But there's more than enough players in that side that can help him out, and as I say, Strauss on the sidelines too. So no real problems with Root other than the fact he should be batting at number 3.
Now, the 3 big problem areas for England in the last few years have been number 2, number 3, number 5 in the batting order. And I guess the other problem now is no Ben Stokes. But let's talk about the number 2 position. And Mark Stoneman, as at the moment, is in possession of that other opening spot. Now, I might be being a bit harsh here on him, but I mean, he seems to be coming into this series under not really any pressure at all. It doesn't feel like. I think the Australians seem to think he's pretty good. There's in the media, a lot of people agreeing, he's the right man. He's the right man. But just looking at what he did against the West Indies, Kev. Now, actually, he didn't do much at all. 150. He scratched around a bit. I know he scored a lot of runs in these warm-up games, but has he kind of got away with it a bit here in terms of criticism, whereas some other people, have had it heaped on their back a bit?
Yeah, I don't think so. His county form over a number of years stands up to the scrutiny of any. Only Kumar Sangakkara scored more runs in the county championship than him last season. And Kumar Sangakkara is a legend. And don't forget that Stoneman missed a month of championship cricket while he was playing for England in that test series. The first thing people who bet on this series need to do is completely and utterly eradicate anything that went before it in England. Playing cricket in England and playing cricket in Australia are 2 totally different things. Just ask the likes of Virat Kohli, or even a couple of the Australian batsmen who got skittled the last time they were in England. 2 absolutely different things. Now, Stoneman will have to face up to some mighty fine new ball bowling, but he won't be facing up to them on green tops with a Duke's ball that swings all over the gaff, like the West Indies managed to get it to do. If he can get through the first hour, batting in Australia becomes an awful lot easier. So I've absolutely no problems with Stoneman. He's the right person for the position, and I think he'll score a mountain of runs in this series. His warm-up form is no surprise to me.
Yeah, I like him, I must say. I actually think the dismissals he got out to against the West Indies were genuinely 2 or 3 very, very good balls. Genuinely world-class deliveries. And I don't think there's any shame in that at all. Now, he's going to be up against it again here, isn't he? Because there's, Australians, they're 3 pace bowlers are top class, aren't they? So he's going to come under scrutiny a bit. But, yeah, I think so far he's looked all right. I think you've got to kind of ignore his statistics a little bit in Test cricket. Brilliant county season, of course. And he is the subject of your first outright bet of the series. And he's got a runs line of 290.5. And, you think he's going to cover this fairly easily?
Well, ironically, Steve, I think the only way he doesn't cover this fairly easily is if England are that dominant in the series that they start winning matches by an innings like they did back in 2009. I'm not convinced that will be the case. I think all 5 Test matches will be pretty competitive. So I do think he's going to get 10 innings. And are you really telling me he's only going to average 29 in the series? Yeah, not for me. I think he'll do an awful lot better than that. If he scores a century in the series, and I certainly wouldn't rule that out at any stage. If he scores a century, then he can get the rest of the runs in bits and pieces, doesn't he? But as I say, if he gets through the first hour in all 5 of these Test matches, batting becomes oh so much easier. We'll go into all the problems I think Australia have got in a minute, but one of them is they don't have backup to the new ball bowlers. So if you can ride the sort of wave of Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood, and Hazlewood will be a big threat to him. But if he can ride that wave, then I think he'll score well. I think he's perfect for Australian conditions. The one thing you need to know in Australian conditions is you need to be able to play length very, very well. And that's exactly what you can do. You don't score runs at Durham if you can't play length. And at the Oval as well. That's a prerequisite whenever you go and play there. You have to know where your off stump is. He obviously does. And I don't know if he'll surprise the Australians. That'll all depend on how highly they regard him to begin with. But I certainly see him going well into the 300 runs for this series.
I think the general consensus is he is fairly well regarded, which I think is a positive for him, definitely a positive. And as I say, this 290.5, he only has to average 30 per innings. That is if he bats 10 innings, of course, which does seem quite low. And who is that 290.5 with, Kev? Which bookmaker?
William Hill.
William Hill. So let's move on to another problem England position, number 5. And at the moment, David Malan is in possession of this place, but it's been up for grabs constantly, hasn't it, over the last few years? And I mean, he basically forced his way in due to some gritty performances against the West Indies, didn't he? And he deserved his spot on that. But how do you see him faring down in Australia?
Again, there's no reason why he can't go well. England pick this number 5 position on character as much as talent. And certainly David Malan's got plenty of that. Yeah, he's not lacking in ability either. He's a fluent batsman, a good batsman to watch. And, batting against the old ball, I think he'll be absolutely fine. Maybe there'll be some struggles against the new ball. But, he's an experienced cricketer. He might be touring Australia for the first time, but he's been around for a long time for Middlesex. Maybe his first-class record is not fantastic, but, go back to Marcus Trescothick's first-class record when he first got into the England side. It wasn't particularly good either. And look at him. He went on to become one of England's best-ever players. I like Malan. I think he's okay in that number 5 position. Can we do better? Yeah, absolutely. Have we got better? No, we haven't. So, I think when you said about England's squad being as bad as it's been going over there, I don't think 1 to 11 it's in inverted commas that bad. It's just the backups are terrible, with the exception of 1 or 2, particularly the batting. Gary Ballance shouldn't be out there for my money, and that could be an issue. If England do have a batsman who struggles, they haven't particularly got anyone good to come in and replace them. But I don't think Malan will be terribly bad. Yeah, he'll be another one of those who will score well in certain innings and he won't score well in others. Typical English batsman, if you like. But I think he's done enough to earn the spot, and I see no reason why he won't have an okay series. And in that position, given the talent that's around him, okay is really all we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he shouldn't disgrace himself. And I do agree with it. I think he will have a couple of sort of decent knocks. How good those knocks are going to be, I'm not sure, and I guess a lot of it depends on timing as well. Could it be a crucial innings at a crucial stage, and then it's well worth his place in the side. So, I mean, I've got to say, for me personally, the two oddball decisions in this squad, batting wise, was James Vincent and Gary Ballance, because I actually see them as two very similar players in terms of end result. They both end up getting 20s and 30s in both completely different fashions, of course. I mean, as far as James Vincent is concerned, he's batting here at number 3, and I don't see personally any real statistic that backs him up batting at number 3 for England right now, Kev. I mean, his Test record, he averages less than 20. He didn't exactly do an awful lot for Hampshire in the first-class summer. A few decent innings here and there, but I think he averaged just 32. It's a very strange decision to me to suddenly pluck him out of nowhere and say, right, you're going down under, you're going to bat at number 3. I mean, talk about throwing someone in at the deep end, especially as we've often lost the first wicket fairly early in the last couple of years. But you actually think he's going to surprise a lot of people, don't you, James Vince? You think he's going to have a very good series?
I think he's an excellent pick. I think he's a natural pick at number 3. I think he's a good pick at number 3. Everything you've just said about him is fair enough if this series was in England, but as I've just said previously, it's not. It's in Australia. What went on in England in the summer and summers prior to that, you may as well chuck it out the window. It's like playing. It's like playing hockey on grass and on ice. They're two different games, and that's exactly how it is here. As I said with Stoneman, you have to be able to play length very well, and you have to be able to drive the ball very well. Well, James Vince is perfect at both of those. And if you look at all of his dismissals in England, they're to swinging ball outside his off stump. The ball doesn't swing in Australia once it's got rid of its shine. So you're looking at 15, 20 overs. So again, he'll have to battle through. There isn't a single person in any cricket match at any stage in their lives that doesn't have to battle for the first 30 or 40 minutes of their innings. But once you get through that battle, you can score well. And James Vince, that's his task. Can he get through that battle? And if he can, he'll score absolutely fine. He's not likened to Michael Vaughan for no reason. He's likened to him because he's almost a clone of him. Drives brilliantly, plays length fantastically. Yes, he's got an issue outside off stump, but if the ball's arrow straight, that ain't going to be that much of a problem. Is he going to score Ricky Ponting-like runs at number 3? Probably not. But he'll do more than a good enough job in this series to fill a problem spot. Is he the long-term answer when England go back home against India next summer? Probably not again. Probably it will need somebody else. But the horse for this particular course, he's spot on.
So it's interesting that you think in Australian conditions he is actually the perfect pick for us at number 3. I mean, I've got to say he's nice to watch. No one can possibly deny that. He's got all the shots in the book, this lad, for sure. But it just seems like he looks brilliant for like 20 or 30, and then he gets out. Yeah, probably caught behind or in the slips. But in Australia, there's less likelihood of that with the lack of swing.
Absolutely, yeah. All he's got to worry about in Australia is pace. Well, that ain't a problem, is it? He'll have been facing pace all of his life. As I say, you must judge length well in Australia. If you can leave a ball that's going over your stumps in Australia, that's half the battle, and that's what he's got to do. But he scored enough runs in the warm-up games to suggest that he's used to the wickets. And while I don't take any notice of the amount of runs that he scored, the fact that he occupied the crease suggests that these 20 and 30-minute bursts that many people are talking about, not just yourself, are a thing of the past, or are not going to come to haunt him in Australia. They may be a thing of the future, but not the present.
You're going to have a little bit of a nibble of him for the top series run scorer for England at 11-1 here, Kev. And I guess part of this is the price itself and the actual batting position he's going to be at.
Yeah, exactly that. 11-1 on a guy who's more than likely going to bat all 10 innings, or certainly every innings that England play. If the openers do their job and they bat the first hour of every game, then the platform's there for Vince to go and do his thing, isn't it? I don't know how many runs it will take to be the top scorer for England. But one thing I do know is he's the man, apart from the front two, he's the man who'll have the best chance to do it. I think he's a great price. I think he'll play all 5 games. I can't see Balance coming in at 3. And there's nobody else who can bat at 3. So I think he'll play all 5 games, as opposed to someone like Milan, who maybe won't. Maybe someone sort of lower down the innings will make way when Ben Stokes makes his way out to Australia, which I'm pretty sure he will do at some point in the 5 games. So really, you want to be focusing on the top 4. Root as captain, maybe as the series goes on, the captaincy pressures might sort of take something away from him. But even if it doesn't, 11-1 in what I class as a 4-horse race is decent value.
Yeah, I mean, when Milan is 12-1, it's certainly the price stands out. I agree with you. The price is a big price for someone that's batting at number 3. I've got to see it before I believe it myself that he can do the job in Australia. But James Vince, 11-1 top England run scorer is your selection. Now let's talk about his middle order, because you say Moeen Ali is going to come in at 6, Bairstow 7, and Woakes at number 8.
Until Stokes gets to Australia.
Well, just let's presume. Well, not presume. Let's just say Ben Stokes doesn't come over. How much of a problem is it moving the likes of Ali up to that number 6 spot?
I don't think that's much of a problem. He's batted much higher than that for his county, much higher than that for England when we went to India. He's flexible enough. He can bat anywhere. I actually think the higher he bats, the better he is. Don't see that being a problem whatsoever.
I mean, we've got Johnny Bairstow, Chris Woakes, as solid as you'll get in Test cricket for their respective batting positions. Would you agree?
Yep, certainly would. Yeah, them two going to be quite important to England's chances, I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, let's move on to the bowling now, and Broad and Anderson, genuine world-class bowlers, great records, but there's been a lot of talk about their records in Australia, and they've not necessarily been great down the years, have they? With the exception of perhaps that series that England won under Strauss. Are you concerned about them or not?
No, not at all. Not at all. There's been a lot of talk going into this series, hasn't there? Most of it's rubbish, and that's another bit of it, really. They're world-class bowlers. Have they had great records over the years? Probably not, but 2 of the series that they've played, England have lost 5-0, so they're not going to have good records, are they? But the series that England won, Jimmy Anderson was brilliant. He really was brilliant. He got the ball swinging, which is an effort in itself out there. And obviously Broad bowls a fantastic length. I mean, he's a good bowler against anyone, but he obviously raises his game against Australia, and they won't need reminding of Trent Bridge a couple of years ago, will they? And not even just that. You think back to the Oval, the series prior to that, when he took the fifer that pretty much turned that match and series on its head. He's a big game player, Stuart Broad, and he's all heart. He's solid. He bowls that nagging length that doesn't give batsmen any time. When Jimmy Anderson, he's as accurate as they come. He'll swing the new ball. He'll get reverse swing with the old ball. I think they're as dangerous a duo as England can put together down under. Yeah, they've not had great records, but they're not bowling at Matthew Hayden, Ricky Ponting, Justin Langer, etc., in this series. So yeah, I have no problems whatsoever with them too.
You really like Broad here, don't you? And you're going to back him over 16.5 wickets in the series.
Yeah, he can take his wickets in a number of ways. If the ball's swinging, he can pitch it up and get it swinging. If it's not swinging, he's got enough pace about him to bang it in short and rush batsmen that way. We've seen him regularly, time and time again, do that. And he can bowl back of a length and, soak up pressure and get his wickets that way. He's a really, really good bowler, and he knows his game. He knows Australia. It was no bad thing that he went out to the Big Bash last year just to, renew acquaintances with the wickets that he'll be playing on. And, I really do think that he'll have a good series. Someone, Elaborates it is, crazily enough, has stuck a 16.5 wickets line up for him for the series. Now, even if England don't bowl 10 times in the series, that's still quite low. They're going to bowl 8 times in the series, so you only need him to take an average of 2 wickets an innings. I don't think that's asking too much of a truly world-class bowler who is pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, a couple of Michels, and you're laughing there, aren't you? Over 16.5 Stuart Broad wickets is the advice. Now, before we move on to Australia, I want to talk about Mason Crane, because England have got a decision to make with this guy, haven't they? About firstly whether actually to start him at the Gabba, and then as the series goes on. Not a lot of people know too much about Mason Crane really outside of one-day cricket, but I mean, I looked at his first-class record. He's not actually played in many first-class games, full stop. You're a Hampshire fan. You're going to know a lot more about him than most people. How do you think he's going to do down under?
If given the chance, he'll be absolutely fine. The reason why he's in the side is because he skittled Australian sides left, right and centre when he was over there. Well, he went over there last year to play club cricket, and he was so good at club cricket that he became a rare overseas player in the Sheffield Shield for New South Wales. You find rocking horse shit more often than you do overseas players in that competition. So that in itself shows you how well he was going. And not only did he get into that New South Wales side, he took wickets in it as well. Okay, that was only at Sydney. Obviously, the spin is helped at Sydney. It's the one area in the country that will spin quite early on. But, that doesn't mean to say that he can't spin the ball at the other places. If England play him at Brisbane, they'll play him for the whole series. If England don't play him at Brisbane, then the earliest he'll play is Melbourne.
Yeah, as I said, they've got a really big decision to make with Crane. It's going to be interesting to see which direction they go with him there. Just talk a little bit about the depth of the England squad. Ben Foakes as the backup keeper, Craig Overton, Tom Curran, backup bowlers. Would they offer much if they were given the chance?
Overton, yes. I like Overton. I think he'll be good in Australian conditions. Ben Foakes, yes, very good batsman. You could if Milan has a bad series, you could quite easily shove Besto up to 5 and play Foakes at 7. There'd be no problem with that whatsoever. Less convinced of Tom Curran. I think he's more a one-day player than a championship stroke 4-5-day player. I think there were better options that England had, but obviously they didn't trust Mark Wood's fitness, which is fair enough. And they did. Maybe they kind of thought that Tom Helm was a little bit too inexperienced. So, they've gone with Curran. He's got international experience, albeit in the limited overs cricket. Probably not going to play. He would need an awful lot of injuries for him to play. I think Ball is definitely ahead of him. I think Overton's ahead of him as well. But as a complete and utter backup option, he may do a job, but I don't think it'll come to that.
And as aforementioned, Gary Ballance is the reserve batsman, but we'll move on to Australia because I think we both have the same opinion. He probably shouldn't be in this squad.
I'd rather have you down there than him.
Hey, I'm not that bad. Let's move on to Australia, and they've threw a couple of curveballs when they announced their squad for this first test. But it's likely to be David Warner, Cameron Bancroft opening the batting, Usman Khawaja, Steve Smith, Peter Hanscom, John Marsh, Tim Payne keeping gloves, Mitchell Starc, Pat Cummins, Josh Hazlewood, Nathan Lyon, and a reserve bowler Chad Sayers and Jackson Bird, I do believe. Well, let's just start with the world class, the top class element of this Australia team. Batting, David Warner, Steve Smith, they look head and shoulders above the rest of that batting lineup.
They do, but Warner's got some neck concern going into the first test, hasn't he? I don't know what it is. He reckons he's got a stiff neck, doesn't he? Maybe it's from looking up at everybody that's in and around him. I don't know. He's a truly world-class batsman, isn't he, Dave Warner? For me, he's Australia's best batsman. But, if he's got a neck issue, that might sort of help England out a little bit. But, whilst everybody was talking about how bad the England squad was going down under, nobody seemed to appreciate the problems that Australia were having until they named this first test squad. And now they all appreciate just why this series It's not as clear cut as people make it out to be. Dave Warner and Steve Smith, I guess you could match them up to Alistair Cook and Joe Root. I don't think the two that score the most runs, their team will win the series. I don't think it's as cut and dry or as black and white as that. But obviously, if one pairing significantly outperforms the other, it'll give their team the best chance.
There may be quite a few English-based listeners or even Australian-based listeners who don't know an awful lot about Cameron Bancroft, who's going to be opening the batting with Warner. I mean, he's been in good form in the Sheffield Shield. That's definitely correct. But now he's been flung into opening the batting in the Ashes. How do you see him faring? Is
it correct, though? I know he had a particularly well-timed knock a couple of weeks ago when he scored
not out.
When he scored the 228 not out. Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, his record aside from that, he doesn't average 40 in first-class cricket, which is the first benchmark that you kind of look to, particularly in Australia, I think, you know, I think you do have to average that down there. He's played a year and a half for Gloucestershire in the county championship, and he's only had 1 ton in that time, and that's in Division 2, which, you know, is arguably weaker than the level that he plays at in Australia. And yeah, I'm not convinced. I find it a very strange inclusion, particularly when, you know, Matt Renshaw scored 200 in his last Test match in Australia. Hasn't done an awful lot wrong. Okay, he had an awful time of it in India recently, didn't he? But if they're picking squads for this series based on who did what in, you know, they might be barking up the wrong tree, so to speak. I know Bancroft's the top scorer in the Sheffield Shield this year, but you take that 228 out, and, you know, and he isn't really, is he? You know, and yeah, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
What style of batsman is he?
Patient batsman. I never like that particularly. He'll put bad balls away. The key will be for England not to bowl him any bad balls, get him coming forward. I mean, he's from Western Australia, isn't he? So he's going to be a fantastic player on the back foot. So if England can pitch it up to him, and that's further emphasised by his record for Gloucestershire, which, as I say, 1 ton in a year and a half, you know, that suggests to me if you get the ball up and swinging at him, your slip cordon will soon be in play. I'm amazed he's been picked over Renshaw. I really am.
Yeah, I mean, from what I was hearing, Renshaw was the next best thing coming through the Australian ranks, but they seem to have deserted him. You know, now coming at number 3, Usman Khawaja, Peter Handscomb at number 5. Now, whenever I've seen these guys play, I've seen them play very well, but also very badly. Seem very hit and miss type players to me, Kev. Khawaja notoriously poor against spin. Whether or not that's going to affect him in this series, well, it will be certainly less so than going somewhere like India. But, I mean, these two guys, are they going to be hit and miss again, do you think? Or is one of these two ready to step up and be really, really consistent?
Hopefully they'll be hit and miss from an English point of view. Khawaja's not that bad a player. But you'd always fancy your chances of getting him out in the first sort of 30, 45 minutes of his innings. I like Handscomb. For the life of me, I can't work out why he's not keeping wicket for this side. It would give them so many more options. And if he's the best, just genuine number 5 that they've got, well, maybe they have got some issues. 150 in his 3 Sheffield Shield matches, you know, doesn't bode well, does it? And it could be the weak link in that side.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those two batsmen fare on against some potentially quality bowling. As we move now to the middle order of Australia, the late middle order, and this is where they certainly did throw a couple of really big curveballs, didn't they? Shaun Marsh is going to be down at number 6. Another player who looks like he's been picked on current form, really. But, I mean, he's nearly 35. I mean, a lot of people presumed his Test career was over. Not that he's ever really been that great in Test match cricket anyway. I mean, how surprised were you that he got the recall?
Not very surprised, really. They were getting touted about. There must have been, Christ, 15 names mentioned for this number 6 spot since they come back from India. I don't think they were ever going to play a debutant, not unless they were going to play Matthew Wade at wicketkeeper, and they obviously were never going to do that, were they? Otherwise, they'd picked him. I mean, you look at the players that were mentioned for the position: Jake Weatherald from Adelaide, Callum Ferguson at Adelaide, Alex Doolan from Melbourne, Marcus Harris, Jake Lehman, him with the most ridiculous moustache you've ever seen in your life. George Bailey, they could have gone back to, had a decent enough season for Hampshire. Glenn Maxwell, Mitchell Marsh, who had the position for an awful long time. Hilton Cartwright. You know, the names are endless, the amount of people that they've auditioned for this particular number 6 spot. And they've, like you say, they've gone with the one who scored, well, not the most runs, because that would be Weatherall, but, you know, they've gone for the one that's got the combination of Sheffield Shield runs and experience at international level. I don't necessarily think it's a bad pick. It's a safe pick more than an exciting one. And maybe the Australians would rather have had a more exciting pick in there, or someone new that could grow into the role.
Now, back in the day, Australia were absolutely, well, they had a massive luxury, didn't they, with Adam Gilchrist behind the stumps. But since he retired, it's been a bit of a merry-go-round at times, hasn't it? And Tim Paine is going to be keeping for them in this first Test match. Perhaps the biggest shock selection of a lot of them. He's not even keeping wicket for his Sheffield Shield team, is he? I do believe right now. He's only ever played 4 Test matches in the past. He's 32 years old, nearly 33. Forget age, that can mean nothing sometimes. But, I mean, this was a huge, huge surprise, wasn't it? Him getting named in this team.
Yeah, it certainly was. He wasn't even in the Tasmania side, was he? At one stage, that's why he ended up playing against England in one of the warm-up matches. The first Cricket Australia 11 was picked from the kind of best of the rest, if you like, from players that weren't playing for their state side, and Tim Paine was one of them. And all of a sudden, he goes from that to playing for Tasmania, scored 71, and gets himself the gig. Well, for the first 2 matches, it should be stressed that they've only picked the squad for the first 2 matches. But, you know, if he goes well, I dare say there's no reason why he doesn't get all 5. But, I mean, very, very, very strange pick.
He doesn't.
You know, his career had dropped that much.
He doesn't offer that much with the bat, does he? He never really has. But from a keeping point of view, I mean, is there a concern there as well? I mean, how good a keeper is he?
No, I think he's an okay keeper. I think he's one of the better keepers that they've got. But, you know, I mean, again, first-class record of less than 30. He hits a good cricket ball. That's why he opens for Hobart Hurricanes in the Big Bash. You know, decent one-day cricketer. I don't see him as a Test cricketer. I think England would be more than happy with the squad they're going up against, particularly if he plays all 5 matches.
Okay, so that's the Australian batting and keeping talked about. Now their big strength is the bowling. Mitchell Starc, Pat Cummins, Josh Hazlewood, Nathan Lyon. I mean, the 3, I've heard a lot of sort of descriptions of this trio of pace attack. I mean, Mitchell Starc, world class, better than Mitchell Johnson in his pomp. Pat Cummins, so fast that he's unplayable. Josh Hazlewood, you know, quality, consistency. And, you know, a lot of people are saying Nathan Lyon's one of the best spinners in the world now. I mean, this pace trio is superb when they're at full fitness, Kev, but how long are they going to stay fit for?
Therein is your problem. And, you know, you look at their squad of 13 and they've picked 2 backup substitute bowlers. So therein, you know, suggests that they don't trust. Well, it's only 2 of them, isn't it, that they don't trust Cummins and Starc. There's no problem with Hazlewood's fitness. The one thing that we should say is one of these 3 would miss out if James Pattinson was fit. If he hadn't been ruled out of the series, I'm pretty sure Pattinson would play. If for nothing else, to give them more batting depth, probably Cummins would be the one to miss out. Yeah, I mean, it's a massive concern, isn't it? Because they've only got 4 bowlers. So if one of them goes down in a Test match, you know, one of them goes kaput, happy days from an England point of view. And, you know, they'd have to be absolutely 100% sure that they're fit for 5 days. You know, Pat Cummins in particular he breaks down more times than a sheet of glass. Stark's a little bit more substantial than that, isn't he? But even then, I can only see him getting used in short bursts. As for the talk that he's better than Mitchell Johnson in his pomp, you can forget that nonsense. That's just bravado going into a test series. He's nowhere near as good as Mitchell Johnson in his pomp, no matter how good he is. The other thing about Mitchell Stark is I only see him as a new ball bowler, really. I don't see him as someone who's going to reverse swing. Yes, he's fast, but I mean, if you think these England batsmen are just going to get troubled by pace, you need to think again. I don't think it's pace that'll outdo them.
Talking of pre-series talk, Nathan Lyon's certainly been in the news, hasn't he? He fancies ending some careers in this series. I mean, I couldn't believe it. He, of all people, was spouting off. He doesn't seem like the type, but how good is he now as a spinner? I mean, is he a bit overrated, or is he genuinely a top quality spinner in the world now?
I don't think he's top quality spinner in the world. I think he's a decent enough spinner, particularly actually in Australian conditions. I mean, the talk going in is nonsense. I mean, I know they don't have many brain cells to begin with, but Australians seem to completely and utterly lose them whenever an Ashes series is on the horizons, because the amount of shit they talk is just laughable. It is. And actually, it's quite insulting when you think that we're approaching 3 years to the day that Phil Hughes sadly passed away on a cricket field. You would think they'd think and shut their mouths with all this nonsense. Yes, I know you want to intimidate the opposition players, but, you know, Jesus Christ, come on, this is a grown man's game. Going back to your question about Nathan Lyon, he's good, but, you know, he's not fantastic.
Yeah, pretty ridiculous. This about, oh, we're going to kill them sort of talk and all that, going to knock their heads off. And
I hope someone's had a word because, you know, as I say, after the Philip Hughes incident, there's absolutely no need for it.
Now, with the Australia series bets, you're going with Steve Smith, top batsman. He's the favourite in that market, and you're going with Josh Hazlewood, top bowler. I mean, fairly obvious explanations, I guess, here, Kev.
2-horse race. I'm taking in the batsman market. I'm taking Smith only because he doesn't face the new ball, and this neck problem with Warner. If that starts to linger, and he ends up missing a Test match, that'll be a pain in the arse. So yeah, Smith for that reason, he'll fill his boots. He's a truly world-class batsman. And Hazlewood's the only one you can guarantee ain't going to fall apart at some point. So, you know, pretty obvious there. He'll play all 5 games. First and foremost, you've got to bet on Stark and Cummins playing all 5 games. Nobody else will, obviously, because they're only going to play 3 seamers to start off with. So I'd rather take the guy who's definitely playing 5 as opposed to someone I've got a chance is playing 5.
Yeah, it makes sense. Not massive prices, but hopefully winning bets over the long course of the series. Now, the series as a whole. I mean, now we've got to talk about Ashes predictions, how you see it's going. We've got 5 venues and 5 different venues. Certain venues are going to suit England, perhaps. Certain venues are going to suit Australia. Series as a whole, long run, how do you see it progressing?
In terms of who do I think will win?
Yeah.
I think England will win the series. And there is a reason why. It's not just because I'm English, but everyone suggests that England's tour last time round was the worst tour England have ever been on, right? Yeah. Most English people think that. Most Australian people think that, and that's fine. You know, we got absolutely drubbed, and that's fair enough. But here's the first innings scores in all 5 Test matches at the halfway mark. Okay, so in Brisbane, Australia were 100 for 5. In Adelaide, they were 257 for 5. In Perth, they were 143 for 5. Melbourne, 112 for 5. Sydney, 97 for 5. Now, they went on and won all 5 of those matches. But the reason why they went on and won all 5 of those matches is because Brad Haddin scored God knows how many runs, and Mitchell Johnson scored plenty of runs as well. You know, their tail wagged. They had batting depth. They had free batsmen, batsmen who batted freely down the order. Now, they don't have that now, Australia. Mitchell Stark's going to come in at number 8 for them in this series, unless they think Pat Cummins is a better batsman. But if he is, he's not much better. We've just mentioned Tim Payne at number 7. Walking wicket would be harsh, but if you're looking at him to score you 300 runs in the series, you've backed the wrong horse. Shaun Marsh at number 6 is by no means guaranteed to score runs. Now flip that over to England, and this England side is almost a clone of that Australian side in terms of the way its batting lineup looks. You know, that Australian side back then, 4 years ago, had a good opening partnership, which I think England have got. They had a number 3 who struggled. They had a brilliant number 4 and number 5 who struggled. And then you've got, you know, so you've got that again. But this time you've got 6, 7, and 8. Moeen Ali, genuine batsman. Jonny Bairstow, probably the best number 7 there is in the world today. And as you quite rightly said earlier on, Chris Woakes, more than capable with the bat at 8. And even Stuart Broad at 9 is no mug. England at this time have got the batting depth. And that's a massive, massive thing. Because if England do get into trouble at 100 for 5, 97 for 5, 112 for 5, they're used to it. Because that's the position they've been in for the last 3 years, on and off, near enough, a lot of the time. And Jonny Bairstow's now used to that pressure of coming in and rescuing them, which is what Australia had 4 years ago. They don't have that, and I think that's the big difference in this series. I think England's batting depth is the one advantage they've got that singles out the two sides more than anything else. Yes, Australia's pace is one thing, but I don't think their attack as a whole is necessarily that much better than England's, and their batting lineup certainly isn't. As I said, it's 2 batsmen against 2 batsmen in terms of the top 5. So I just see the batting depth being something that's really, really important. And the other thing that could sway the series England's way is England are going to play 5 genuine bowlers as well. They're going to have Moeen Ali, and then they're going to have 4 seamers, or they're going to have Moeen Ali, 3 seamers, and Mason Crane. Whereas Australia, having picked a batsman at 6 and a separate wicket-keeper at 7, will only have 4 bowlers in this series, unless you want to call Steve Smith a bowler. But, you know, if they're relying on him to get wickets, England are rubbing their hands with glee. So I think the 2 key areas in this series England have got covered: batting depth, bowling stock in each match. And over the course of the 5 matches, I think that'll make the difference.
They're as big as 7-2 to win this series, England. I mean, the Aussies are as short as 1.4, even shorter in some parts. I mean, it does seem they're maybe a little bit overrated here. That the talk that England are that bad and Australia are that good, and you think there's a bit too much overhype here with Australia.
England are as bad as people are suggesting overall. I don't have any problems with that, apart from the 5 truly world-class cricketers, like I mentioned right at the start. But what nobody seems to appreciate, or didn't appreciate until they named this squad, was the problems that Australia are having. This is not the Australian side of the 90s, the early 2000s, 4 years ago. It isn't. It's nothing like that. It's 2 batsmen, 2 bowlers, and 1 bowler who's very capable on his day. And that's it. So in that way, the 2 sides are quite evenly matched. The other thing is, often with home advantage, you have the kind of, if someone's going badly, you can jack them in and get someone else in. But the problem that Australia have got in this series is after the first 2 matches, and they're not going to change in the first 2 matches. After the first 2 matches, they give up 4-day cricket and the Big Bash starts. So anyone that they're going to be picking to come in for Perth, for Melbourne, and for Sydney, the only cricket they're going to have had is 20 over slogfests, which is obviously a completely and utterly different game. So they've structured their season completely balmy as well. And, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if they're stuck with these 13 players, maybe 1 batsman finds his way in throughout the whole of the series. So if England can start off on top, I see no reason why they can't not dominate the series. I don't think this will be an England win like it was 8 years ago. But I do think England can win 3 of the 5 matches.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to go England to win the series at 4.4, and you're going with a 3-2 correct score to England, 16-1, and 4-1 correct score at 33-1. Which 3 test matches are you giving to England?
I'm not really sure. I'm giving 3 individual matches to England, to be honest. I think England could be competitive in all of them. The toss is an awful big thing in Australia, isn't it? If you can bat first and put the runs on the board, then you're in control of the test match, particularly against a side that doesn't have batting depth, as I've said. Yeah, Yeah, I'm not sure which three England will win. I think England will win 3. The one thing I will say is anyone who's doing correct score bets in this series, don't bother with any denominations that don't include 5 results, because there will be 5 results barring any rain. And if there's any rain, well, bad luck. These 2 batting lineups aren't good enough to bat 5 days.
Yeah, I would totally agree there. I mean, if it was me personally, I would look at the first test and the third test as being Australia's best historically. Certainly Dover in the WACA. We never do anything they're doing. It seems Australia always get their tails up for that particular fixture for whatever reason. I mean, who knows? The past is the past, but I would certainly think Australia would go well in Perth. But yeah, there's one other series bet before we move on to the first test. Under 40.5 sixes, which is a bit of an interesting one. This is at Bet365. What's the thinking behind this one, Kev?
There's no 6 hitters, really. You know, take Dave Warner out of the equation, and if he's got a dodgy neck, he ain't going to be swinging from the hip, is he? I mean, you look back 4 years ago, who hit the most sixes? Brad Haddin, well, he ain't here. Mitchell Johnson, well, he isn't here. England barely hit a 6. It was only when Ben Stokes came in for that last game that England even looked competent with the bat. Now, obviously, I think England are going to go an awful lot better with the bat here, but who really hit 6s for them? Ben Stokes. Well, he's not here to start off with either. You look at their top 2. Well, it's a national bank holiday back home when Alistair Cook hits a 6, isn't it? And you know, Stoneman's no more of a big hitter. Vince, you know, I mean, there'll be the occasional 6 from top edge to pulls and things like that, but you know, it's not a series full of, you know, aggressive batsmen and things like that. In fact, there's a lot of sort of stroke playing and dour batsmen in this series. And also, you've got to remember that the Australian grounds, they're not your postage stamp grounds either, are they? I mean, Gabba's massive, Adelaide's massive straight, and obviously day-night game, that ball's likely to swing, so batsmen are likely to be more careful. And Melbourne's the biggest ground in the world. So it's only really Perth and Sydney that you're going to get a decent amount of 6s in, and you've got to average more than 8 per match, so that's more than 2 per innings if there's 4 innings in every match. I just don't see it.
Under 40.5 6s at Bet365 there. Your other series bets: England to win the series, correct score 3-2, 4-1. Steve Smith, top Australian batsman. Josh Hazlewood, top Australian bowler. Vince, top England batsman. Stuart Broad over 16.5 wickets, and Stoneman over 290.5 runs. And there might be some other bets, series ones on your website. So keep your eye on those for potentially some other bets. Is that right? Not right, Kev?
Yeah, that's right. I haven't been through all the bookmakers, I must admit, but I will do that in the lead up to the first test. So yeah, keep an eye out. I will do a specials post, and any extra ones will be in there.
Okay, on to the first test at the Gabba then. And I read an interesting article just tonight about the groundsman who's retiring. He's never, ever prepared a wicket that Australia have lost on, which is quite phenomenal, I must say. I mean, I will counteract that a little bit in that through most of his reign, which started in 1990, it was such a world-class team. You know, they're never going to lose to anyone, are they, really? But certainly in recent years, you could say it's a bit of a surprise. Why do Australia play so well here?
Do they play so well here, or do their opponents play so badly?
Well, I guess there's an element of teams will have been a bit undercooked, underprepared down the years. But England do seem more suitably prepared in that sort of instance. What type of surface do we usually get here, Kev?
Decent batting one. I mean, really and truly, you look at it, and conditions-wise, it's only England and South Africa that are going to be comfortable, if comfortable is the right word, at the Gabba. None of the subcontinent sides are going to be comfortable in Australia conditions, not just in Brisbane, but any of the wickets. And the West Indies team these days, they're hardly even worth registering, are they? So, you know, as good as this record is, realistically, how many times have England and South Africa played here down the years? Or down his, 27 years he's been doing it for? What you're looking at, 5, 6? The other 21 needn't really be registered as an interest. you know, you'd expect Australia to win regardless. But it's a good, you know, it's always a good batting track. You've always got to work hard in the first session, haven't you? But that's Australia, you know. Certainly, one-day cricket is the best one-day wicket in the country. Chris Lynn doesn't do what he does for Brisbane Heat because there's any demons in the wicket. And Nasser Hussain found out to his cost that you do not win the toss and bowl first here. You win the toss, you bat, Nasser, if you're listening. Yes, you're going to have a tricky 2 hours first up. But if you get through there, the runs will flow. You know, scores of 500 are quite regular here. And if there is a drawn match, it will come from here. But again, I'm not convinced either of these batting lineups are good enough.
It's a good batting wicket, so it makes sense to bet on some quality batsmen to cover their performance lines. And you're going to be taking Steve Smith's performance and Joe Root's performance. And this is at Bet365 or some other bookies. I don't know if any other bookies are offering performances for this series, Kev. But as it goes, 1 point for a run, 20 points for a wicket, 10 points for a catch, and 25 points for a stumping. And say Steve Smith's line 105.5, Joe Root 96.5. I mean, they might pick up bits and pieces with a catch or two, or even a wicket or two. But really, you would expect them to be covering this with the bat.
Yeah, certainly would. I always think it's important that a captain lays the marker down in an Ashes series. Smith always does, to be fair. Well, Smith does that in any series, to be fair. And I'm sure it won't have be lost on Joe Root that he needs to stand up and be counted at the Gabba and set the stall out. You think back to Michael Vaughan, he did that. Andrew Strauss did that. You know, and the successful England captains, they do that. The ones that didn't do that, Flintoff, etc., generally got murdered. And so I think it's important, and I think both captains realise their importance, not just in the match but in the series. Smith's got a decent record here. He averages 54 with the bat. So, you know, 2 average innings on that level covers his line of 105.5. I should mention these two are both at Paddy Power. Joe Root scores runs against Australia, doesn't he? And, you know, I think they'll get catches. They're both fielding the slips, don't they? Catches will come their way. Not really reliant on wickets. So, you know, if they do take a wicket, that's a particular Brucey bonus. But those lines look perfectly achievable to me. You know, if either are going to get centuries in the series, it's you know, they'll probably get them here, and one of them gets it covered.
And staying with performances, Chris Woakes looks a ridiculously low 85.5. I mean, this bloke can contribute in all 3 aspects, can't he, Kev?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, if you split it up into 40 for wickets, 40 for runs, and 10 for a catch, that covers it. So you're looking at 1 wicket per innings, 20 runs per innings, and a catch. Well, that's not asking too much of any cricketer, really, is it? Particularly someone who bats at 8. And he'll be the first ball change. He had a decent enough time of it in the warm-up matches, so he's obviously bowling a lot better now than he was in England at the end of the summer. And well, we know his batting credentials. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he scores some runs on this wicket, actually, particularly if he faces the old ball. I think that 85.5 line is scandalous, quite frankly.
Who's that with?
Paddy Power.
Yeah, I don't know what they've been drinking there. That's just madness. I mean, even if he got 2 ducks with a bat, you're laughing with 4 wickets and 1 catch. It does seem a crazily low line. He's going to have a real shocking match for him not to cover that, really, isn't he? And staying with Woakes, you're going to have a nibble of him. First innings, top England run scorer, 50-1. So it's a bit of a very big price. But always a chance of that top order collapsing, isn't there?
Yep, absolutely. If Australia had a decent number 8, I'd be picking their number 8 as well, but they don't. So there's no point in expecting someone to outscore them. But England certainly do. And like you say, if the top order does come into calamity, then, you know, 6, 7 and 8 often bail them out. So, you know, silly price. Woakes can definitely bat. He's got many first-class centuries. I think he's even got a test century now, hasn't he? And no demons in this wicket. If the top order do need bailing out, he's more than capable of doing it at that price. I'll be paying all series long to see how he does, I think.
And another bet for you, and I must say I absolutely hate these bets, these type. Mark Stoneman to beat Bancroft in the first innings, head-to-head market. I mean, I hate these because all it takes is one Jaffa and your batsman's out for a duck, and say the other batsman just get one and you get beaten. But you think Stoneman is going to outscore him first innings?
Certainly do, yeah. Guy with test experience who's in good form against a guy who's obviously going to be feeling it first up, who I believe is overrated from this 200 he scored. It was in Perth that he scored that 200. And as I said, right back when we were discussing Cameron Bancroft, if England can pitch the ball up, and that's exactly what they're going to do with the new ball, I'm pretty sure they'll get his edge before long. That's not the case with Stoneman. He's very, very good length and knowing where his off stump is. Don't think Stoneman will need all that many, to be honest.
I mean, on the flip side, of course, you could win this bet with one run. So, you just got to beat the man, haven't you? It's as simple as that, really. No, I mean, he could actually lose the bet scoring 150. I've seen it happen. But, the logic there, Bancroft opening the batting might just struggle first innings with a lot of expectation on his shoulders, being hyped up a bit. Those are your bets for this match. In terms of outcome, I mean, you said in the outright preview that if there is going to be a draw in this series, this is the only possible venue, really, unless there's rain. But, I mean, Australia 1.75 favourites here. Would you be lumping on them?
Not before the toss, no. I said that loosely about the draw. I still don't believe either side are good enough to bat 5 days on any wicket, whether it's a road or not. And there's a reason why they're on about playing 4-day test matches, isn't there? Because very rarely do they go to a 5th day anyway. So I don't expect these two bowling attacks to drag it out that long. 1.75, no, not for me. I do think it's a 2-horse race, Australia or England. But I think whoever wins the toss will have a significant advantage. And I wouldn't want to be back in Australia beforehand. If England win the toss and bat first and they're sort of 120 for one or something at lunch, you won't be getting 1.75 on Australia, that's for sure.
So, the toss is probably as important here as any other ground in Australia.
Here in Perth, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe Sydney too. You don't want to be batting last at Sydney. But yeah, massive toss. I mean, look back to that Nasser Hussain game. What did they run up on the first day? 2.5 million, something like that.
It was 340 or something for 3 or something.
Yeah, it was mental, wasn't it? And I mean, England, obviously England were dejected enough as it was by their captain making a Horlicks of his decision, but then they lost Simon Jones on that first day too. So there were mitigating circumstances, but you just don't do it. It's just a well-known fact that you win the toss in Brisbane, you bat, and you just stick it out for 2 hours.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting how it goes. 5 bets there, as aforementioned. Performance line, Steve Smith, Joe Root, Chris Woakes, all at Paddy Power. Stoneman to beat Bancroft. What bookmakers that at, Kev?
Ladbrokes or Coral.
Ladbrokes or Coral. And then Chris Woakes, top England batsman. Those are your 5 bets for the first test match. We'll be back to preview the second test, the day-night contest from Adelaide. And, sorry if we were a little bit rushed talking about the first test itself, because we had this series to preview, but we will be in a lot more detail for that second test. But let's hope for a really good series, Kev. From an English point of view, let's hope we absolutely batter them. But I think it's going to be intriguing cricket, perhaps not the top-class cricket of years gone by, because both teams are maybe not what they used to be, but should be intriguing, mate.
Should be a good series, yeah, absolutely. It'll be competitive, might be low scoring, might not be high class, but it'll be dramatic and tense. And 5 results, as you say, hopefully from an English point of view, more go in their favour. And
from a betting point of view, from this podcast in general. Okay, thanks very much, Kev. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.
And yourself, Steve. Enjoy the late nights, and not much sleep, and I'll catch you before Adelaide.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You know, I think there'll be quite a few all-nighters that I'll be doing, and I'm sure we'll be conversing a little bit during this. So take care, everyone. Goodbye.